It started with a sealed envelope, then another and another, laid out side by side on a kitchen table, as if someone was preparing for something final. Across town, a teenager stepped off a bus, unaware she was being watched. She took the same route home as she always did, the same time, the same quiet street. Inside the house, her older brother was upstairs, headphones on. The front door creaked open, and what unfolded next would only last seconds, but it had been building for years. There were warnings, there were reports, there was a trail of missed chances that nobody followed. This could have been stopped. By the way, this is Dark Case, and you can call me Jack. I bring you rare and unseen true crime cases, as well as other things that you may later regret knowing, with multiple regular uploads every single week. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, then make sure you hit subscribe now and turn all notifications on. And now for today's silly little question. Who is the one TV or movie villain or bad guy that you secretly root for? Let me know down in the comments. All of your support over on Patreon, as well as right here via channel memberships on YouTube, are so appreciated, and I really can't thank you all enough. However, thank you. And now, on with the video. By the time John Edwards did what he did, he'd already left a long trail of damage behind him. Over the course of 5 decades, he'd fathered 10 children to 7 different women. 4 of those women had formerly accused him of mistreating them, both psychologically and physically. At least one of his adult daughters had taken out an apprehended violence order, or AVO, against him. One ex-partner changed her name and moved interstate just to escape him. But none of this stopped him from gaining access to the kids that he had with Olga. They were named Jack and Jennifer. John Edwards was a retired financial advisor and a former army reservist. He was outwardly composed, conservative, and well-educated. People called him controlling, but not dangerous, at least not on paper. In reality though, he was described by one ex as a sadist hiding in plain sight. He regulated every dollar that Olga spent. He controlled her wardrobe, her phone, even her yoga class schedule. Once, when she refused to wear high heels on a shopping trip, he told her to go back upstairs and change into something appropriate. He didn't scream at her, and he didn't punch the walls. He just made it feel like your life wasn't yours anymore. According to testimony from one of his other ex-partners, John would start small. Comments about clothing, weight, tone of voice, and then it would escalate. A thrown object, a slammed door, a threat disguised as a joke. Over time, you stopped challenging him. You stopped talking back. You just hoped that he wouldn't snap. And when Olga finally left him in 2016, she knew, deep down, that this didn't just mean that she was free. She told a psychologist that she feared waking up one day and finding Jack dead because John could never control his temper. She told police about how he treated her. She filed reports. She warned the court. But none of this seemed to matter, at least not to the police, not to the family court, and not to the system that gave him a gun. When Olga left John in early 2016, she did everything that she was supposed to do. She moved out, she cut off all contact, she took the children with her. She even reported the violence to the police 3 separate times. She told officers that John had kicked Jack, that she'd punched him and slapped Jennifer. He'd even once grabbed his son by the throat in public. She also told them that she feared he would eventually kill one of their offspring. But frustratingly, what happened next would set the stage for everything that followed. The senior constable who took Olga's statement failed to classify it as assault. Instead, the report was marked "No offence detected." Even worse, the children weren't recorded as victims at all. This meant that the violence did not show up in the system. And so when the custody battle reached the family court, John Edwards arrived with a blank record and a story. He told the court that Olga was bitter, unstable, and trying to alienate the children, and somehow it worked. Despite psychologist reports, police contact, and mounting concerns about his behaviour, The independent children's lawyer, Debbie Morton, advised the court that there was no reason to deny John access. Morton would later claim that she didn't recall either of the children expressing fear of their father. However, both Jack and Jennifer had both told therapists they were terrified of him. In fact, Jennifer had even explicitly asked that the court write an order banning contact. That request, though, was never passed on. At one point during the proceedings, the family's psychologist pulled Morton aside. She warned her that John was more dangerous than he appears. "I never felt Jack was safe with John," she later testified, "not even for a car ride." But Morton reportedly dismissed Olga's presentation in court as simply being too emotional. At one point, she even described her as a hard-nosed bitch. Olga would win full custody in 2018, but by then, it was too late. John Edwards had found out where they lived, and he'd already started planning what would come next. There were two decisions that could have changed everything. The first came in March of 2016. John Edwards walked into Hornsby Police Station and calmly told officers that his ex-wife, Olga, might soon make false allegations against him as part of a custody dispute. He said he wanted it on record. So you see, he'd set the whole thing up. The second came 9 months later when Olga reported those allegations. She told Senior Constable Brooke Cooper that John had physically assaulted her, Jack, and Jennifer. The officer did make some notes. She asked Olga to bring the kids in for interviews, but when Olga didn't just return straight away, the file was closed. There was no follow-up. There was no welfare check. Instead, a note was just added to the case file, suggesting that Olga may have fabricated the story in order to gain an advantage in court. Police did exactly what John asked them to do. And all of this means that when the New South Wales Firearms Registry later ran a background check on John, the system came up mostly clean. The algorithm didn't flag misfiled reports. It didn't notice mislabeled victims. It didn't count no offence detected as cause for concern. The only red mark on his record was an AVO from one of his adult daughters, and that was filed back in 2011. None of this was enough to stop a gun licence. So in May of 2017, John Edwards legally obtained permits to purchase both a pistol and a rifle. Later, the registry staff, according to the coroner, were operating under a dangerously narrow interpretation of their duties. They believed that they could only deny a licence if a mandatory disqualifier was present, something like a criminal conviction or an active AVO. But John Edwards had pretty much made a career of staying just inside the lines. He hadn't been charged with anything since 1998. And so, the coroner would later write, a complete failure to appreciate the pattern of DV going back 24 years led directly to John Edwards legally owning 5 firearms by the end of 2017. One of these was a 9mm Glock, the other was a .357 Magnum revolver. They were both kept in a locked cabinet at the St Mary's Pistol Club. By the time that John Edwards showed up at the Pistol Club on the 4th of July 2018, everything was in place. He had booked a rental car. This is because Jack and Jennifer both knew what his regular car looked like. The weapons were ready, they were loaded and stored under his name. The club membership was active despite earlier red flags, and nobody had stopped him. Years earlier, John had been denied a firearms license after falsely stating that he'd never been the subject of an AVO. One club even described him as aggressive and claimed that he was trying to railroad them into giving him membership. However, when that failed, he simply applied elsewhere and lied once again. He told the St Mary's Pistol Club that he'd left the previous club over a personality clash, and they didn't really check any further. Had they looked into his previous rejection, they might have seen the pattern. Had the registry officers cross-checked court filings and police notes with DV histories, they might have seen the danger, but no one did. Instead, John walked into that club, opened his locker and retrieved 2 powerful handguns. He seemed flustered, according to staff. In fact, he slammed the locker shut so hard that he jammed the locker door and it needed to be pried open with a screwdriver. This doesn't sound like someone in a good state of mind. The very next day, he left his Normanhurst home and drove to Pennant Hills Station. Jennifer got off the school bus just before 5 p.m. John followed her in the rental car. He then waited until she reached the front door and then pulled onto the driveway. Inside that house, 15-year-old Jack was playing Fortnite in his bedroom. Jennifer ran for her life up the stairs. What happened next lasted just seconds, but it could never be undone. Police later determined that Edwards had used the Glock on both Jennifer and Jack. They were found crumpled together beneath Jack's desk. Jennifer had tried to hide, and Jack had likely tried to protect her, but neither of them stood a chance. Later that evening, John Edwards returned home. He wrote a few more letters, and then did the same to himself as he had done to Jennifer and Jack. Many who followed the inquest believe that this was his final act of control, a planned, cold attack on the people he believed Olga had taken from him, and then removing himself from the situation.
2 precious, innocent lives lost in a moment of ultimate cowardice that has devastated not only family and friends, but the entire community.
You know, how could this happen?
Just send shivers down your spine. I was feeling ill.
Jack and Jennifer's mother, Olga, returned home today, ushered in by detectives and followed soon after by the family dog, confronting the scene where just 2 nights ago her ex-husband John took their children's lives.
We don't know how the hell anyone would ever be able to get over that.
School friends and sporting teammates among a stream of people paying their respects, remembering smiling, happy faces that hid the pain of their parents' bitter 2-year custody battle.
He's a very nice guy. Very tragic what happened to him.
Jennifer's such a great friend. She helped us around the school and she's a really supportive friend.
The growing floral tribute makes clear where this horrific crime took place, but for 2 years, Olga Edwards had tried to keep the location a secret to protect her children from their father, who had been banned from seeing them. Among the many unanswered questions, how Edwards was able to track them down, why he was granted a gun licence if he was considered a threat to his family, and why he was allowed to remove the weapons from his gun club at St Mary's.
It's terrible to think these things can happen so close to home.
A car was removed last night from outside Edwards' house at Normanhurst. He reportedly hired one to avoid his children recognising him when he arrived, all part of an evil plan he's believed to have prepared for more than a year.
The inquest into the end of Jack and Jennifer Edwards ran for months. 30 witnesses were called. Thousands of documents were reviewed, but time and time again, the same theme emerged. This didn't come out of nowhere. This wasn't unpredictable. This wasn't unknowable. In fact, it was entirely preventable. There were so many chances. The coroner, Teresa O'Sullivan, fought back tears as she read her findings. She pointed to failures at every level. Police who misclassified reports, firearms registry staff who weren't trained to identify patterns of behaviour, and a court-appointed children's lawyer who failed to convey the children's fear. O'Sullivan saved some of her strongest criticism for that lawyer, Debbie Morton, who, O'Sullivan said, did not take reasonable steps to verify the children's statements. She failed to present Jennifer's plea to ban contact with her father, and she did not properly assess or report the risk that John Edwards actually posed, even after being directly warned by psychologists. Morton has since been removed from the legal aid panel. She does, however, deny any wrongdoing, but the consequences of her omissions are irreversible. One of the psychologists told the inquest that she'd feared John Edwards' retribution so strongly that she avoided telling him what she truly thought, that he was dangerous and that Jack and Jennifer should never be left alone with him. And she was right to be afraid. He had a documented history of retaliating against women who challenged his authority. One former partner described how she fled over a backyard fence along with her children after he threw a rolling pin at her head. Another described having an abduction plan drilled into her by her own mother just in case. One adult daughter recalled a chilling moment when John Edwards screamed threats and held a cigarette lighter to a coffee table, asking, Should I set fire to the whole house? Is that what you want me to do? Again and again, professionals testified that they felt something was very, very wrong, but they either didn't act or they just weren't believed. And now Jack and Jennifer were gone, and the system was left scrambling to explain or to excuse why no one connected the dots. At Jack and Jennifer's funeral, DV campaigner Natalia Esdale-Watts approached Olga and asked her to share her story publicly. Olga, however, refused. "There is no hope here," she said. "Whatever you can do it to leave this country." Somehow things find a way to get even worse. 5 months after the event, it all got too much for Mother Olga, and her time on this earth came to an end in the very same house where this all happened. In her final days, she was living in Jack's bedroom. She was sleeping where the bodies had been found. Friends say that she was consumed by grief and by guilt. She tried everything. She went to the police. She hired lawyers. She told psychologists, teachers, as well as social workers what John was capable of. But the more she spoke up, somehow the less she was believed. Rose Batty, another woman who lost someone in a similar way, said it best. John Edwards didn't murder Olga, but he may as well have. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew that his actions would break her, and he wanted her to live with that, to suffer, and for him to not be held accountable. It was his final act of power.
Jennifer loved caring for animals and dreamed of being a vet. Older brother Jack was cheeky and headstrong. They had a mother who loved them and a father who killed them. An inquest today finding police, the firearms registry and the family law system failed to pick up on the warning signs. His smile hid a heinous side seen by his 7 partners and 10 children. 50 years of violence, stalking and intimidation. Police admitting they either failed to record or even read his case notes, which allowed John Edwards to legally purchase 5 firearms. In a 272-page report, the coroner summed it up with one sentence. The evidence plainly reveals the deaths of Jack and Jennifer were preventable.
A coroner would later call the murders a stark reminder of the systemic failure too many women and children face every day. She issued 24 recommendations, including mandatory DV training for police, stronger screening at the firearms registry, better sharing of information between the court system and law enforcement, and stricter oversight of independent children's lawyers. Some of those changes have already been implemented, others are still under review, but none of them will bring back Jack, Jennifer, or Olga. Their half-siblings who never even got to meet them told the court that they see themselves in Jack and Jennifer. They were other versions of us, one said. They had lived with John. As the final word, one of John Edwards' ex-partners, someone who escaped his control decades earlier, offered this chilling reflection. In the end, he won. He got to keep everything. He got to see the kids. He was not going to be told by anyone what he could and couldn't do. She also admitted this. When I heard that he was dead, I finally stopped checking the rear view mirror. Be careful out there, and I'll see you soon.